The Galactic Council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from hundreds of species across the galaxy. They were gathered to discuss trade deals and peace treaties, business as usual. Glowing holographic orbs hovered in the room, showing maps of star systems and trade routes. Murmurs and whispers spread across the chamber as alien leaders engaged in polite conversation. At the far side of the room, Ambassador Sarah Gray sat quietly, observing everything. She had been sent as Earth's representative to this council, a relatively new addition to galactic politics. The humans had been treated as little more than a minor race useful for manual labor, perhaps, but certainly not a threat. Sarah knew today's meeting would change everything. She stood, her calm demeanor hiding the storm brewing inside her. The room fell silent as the human ambassador cleared her throat. Her voice was steady, but it carried a weight that demanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Galactic Council," Sarah began, scanning the faces of alien delegates. "I have a matter to raise that can no longer be ignored." The alien representatives gave her curious glances, but no one expected what came next. "You attacked our home." A wave of shock spread through the chamber like wildfire. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Delegates leaned forward, their faces twisted with confusion and disbelief. "What nonsense is this?" A tall, scaled alien with dark green skin hissed from across the room. "No member of this council would attack your insignificant world." Sarah didn't flinch. She calmly tapped her wrist, and a holographic display projected into the air above her. Images of destroyed colonies on the Moon and Mars filled the chamber. Burnt-out settlements, ruined habitats, and lifeless human bodies. The council erupted in chaos. Some alien representatives denied involvement outright. Others whispered to each other nervously. The chamber that had once been orderly was now filled with panic and confusion. "Impossible!" One of the delegates shouted. "There is no record of any authorized attack on your species." Sarah crossed her arms, letting the images speak for themselves. When the council noise became unbearable, she raised a hand, and the room reluctantly fell silent again. "This attack was not an accident," Sarah said coldly. "We have evidence that it was planned by members of this council. Our colonies were not destroyed by rogue pirates. They were hit by advanced fleets with technologies only available to high-level factions in this room." The tension in the chamber grew thick. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared at each other with suspicion, realizing that someone in their ranks had betrayed the fragile peace. The hidden conspiracy, a small, insectoid alien named Shurval, who represented the Andorran Confederacy, finally broke the silence. "Ambassador Gray," he said in a cautious tone, "surely there has been some mistake. Why would anyone attack Earth's colonies? Your people are no threat to us." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly why they did it." She paced slowly across the chamber, her footsteps echoing. "When humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council, we were seen as weak. A young species. You thought we would be easy to control." She pointed at one of the alien delegates, a four-eyed, bird-like creature named Cyrex, who represented a powerful faction known as the Kelvar Dominion. "You thought that by hitting us early, you could cripple our expansion and keep us under your thumb. But you underestimated us." Cyrex squawked in protest, his feathers ruffling. "These are baseless accusations. We had no involvement in any such attack." Sarah gave him a cold smile. "Our investigators found your encrypted transmission logs. Your fleets coordinated with mercenaries to carry out the attack. You thought no one would survive to uncover the truth." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The delegates turned to Cyrex, their eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. The bird-like alien shifted uncomfortably under their glares, realizing that the weight of the council was now pressing down on him. The human response as Sarah raised her hand again, and the holographic display shifted. This time, it showed massive human warships, sleek and bristling with weapons, stationed just outside the council's territory. "Our colonies may have fallen," Sarah continued, "but we did not." She turned to face the council. "While you celebrated our weakness, we rebuilt. In secret. We prepared for the day when we would learn the truth." The chamber fell silent as the image of Earth's fleet loomed above them. The alien delegates now realized that the humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "We are not here to declare war," Sarah said, her voice sharp and clear. "But make no mistake, if justice is not served today, the next time you see our fleets, they will not be here to negotiate." The threat hung in the air like a dagger over the council's heads. The council's dilemma panic spread through the chamber once more. The delegates whispered furiously among themselves, weighing their options. No one had expected humanity to respond so boldly or so prepared. One of the senior members of the council, a reptilian creature named Veclin, spoke up. "If what the humans say is true," he growled, "then we have no choice but to hold the Kelvar Dominion accountable." The council erupted in arguments. Some factions demanded immediate action against the Kelvar. Others worried that punishing them would spark a civil war. All the while, Sarah stood silently, watching the chaos unfold with a calm but dangerous expression. Veclin raised a clawed hand to silence the room. "Enough!" he barked. "The council will vote." The delegates hesitated but knew they had no choice. Under the pressure of humanity's looming fleets, the decision was swift. The Kelvar Dominion would be held responsible, stripped of their council seat, and forced to pay reparations to Earth. The new power in the galaxy. With the vote complete, Veclin turned to Sarah. "The council offers its deepest apologies, Ambassador Gray." "We did not know." Sarah's cold gaze didn't soften. "Now you do." She deactivated the holographic display and took a step back. "We accept your decision, but know this Earth will not forget what happened, and we will not be underestimated again." As Sarah turned to leave, the alien delegates exchanged uneasy glances. They knew, from this moment forward, that humanity was no longer a weak young species. Earth had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council, once confident in their power, had been shaken to its core by a single human diplomat. In one day, humanity had turned the tables, exposing a conspiracy and forcing the Council to see them as equals. The day truth was revealed, the galaxy learned a valuable lesson. The Galactic Council was a place where power ruled. Each species had its own seat, and decisions were made by the oldest, most powerful races. Newer species, like humans, were allowed to sit in the chamber, but only as observers, their opinions rarely taken seriously. Earth was seen as too young, too weak, and too primitive to matter. That was exactly what the Council believed until now. Ambassador Jake Larson stood at the center of the chamber, wearing a calm expression that hid the storm inside him. Today was the day humanity would change everything. He looked around the vast room filled with hundreds of alien leaders, each seated according to their status. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound came from the hum of holograms projecting maps and data in mid-air. Jake took a deep breath and spoke in a voice that was steady but sharp. "We have been silent long enough. It's time we faced the truth. You attacked our home." The statement hit the room like a thunderclap. The silence shattered as alien representatives leaned forward. Whispers filled the air, and one alien delegate, a scaly, blue-skinned being, hissed in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" it demanded. "No one attacked Earth." A game of deception. Jake didn't flinch. He pressed a button on the console in front of him, and a massive holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed footage of burning human colonies on Mars and the asteroid belt, with destroyed habitats and lifeless bodies drifting through space. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't out of shock, it was out of guilt. Every alien leader present knew exactly what this meant. "These attacks were not accidents," Jake continued, his voice cold. "We traced the weapons used back to mercenary fleets funded by certain factions within this council." Gasps echoed through the room. Delegates shifted uneasily in their seats, their antennae twitching, scales rippling, or feathers ruffling. A tall alien with black eyes and shimmering skin, Ambassador Valar of the Zarn Coalition, spoke up. "This is outrageous!" Valar exclaimed, trying to mask his panic. "No such attack was authorized by this council." Jake gave a bitter smile. "Of course it wasn't. You made sure to cover your tracks well." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "But we still found the truth. And now, we are here to turn the tables. The evidence unfolds. The hologram shifted, showing intercepted communications between alien factions. The messages revealed the truth. Several powerful council members had supplied weapons and ships to pirates, hoping the attack would cripple Earth's growing influence. They thought that if humanity's expansion was stopped early, the species would remain weak and dependent. Valar and his allies looked around nervously as more evidence was displayed. There was no way to deny it now. Their plot had been uncovered. Jake stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the guilty delegates. "You wanted to use us? You thought we were too weak to fight back?" His voice grew sharper. "But we are not weak. We survived your attack. And now, it's your turn to feel vulnerable." The shift in power, another tap on Jake's console, and the hologram changed again. This time, it showed Earth's warships, massive, sleek vessels with advanced weaponry, positioned just outside key alien trade routes and colonies. The aliens had believed the humans were still rebuilding after the attacks. They had no idea that Earth had already developed a powerful fleet, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The delegates stared in disbelief at the image of the human fleet. They had assumed humans were still struggling to rebuild their colonies, but instead, Earth had been preparing for war. Jake allowed the silence to stretch. "We have blockaded your supply lines," he said calmly. "Your fleets are surrounded. You are trapped, just as you wanted us to be." The alien leaders, once so confident in their power, were now filled with fear. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The ultimatum. Valar rose from his seat, his face filled with anger and desperation. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "If you start a war, the entire galaxy will turn against you." Jake's expression remained calm, but there was steel in his voice. "We are not here to start a war." He folded his arms, his gaze steady. "We are here to give you a choice." The room held its breath as Jake continued. "You can admit your guilt, hand over the traitors who organized the attack, and make reparations. Or," he paused, letting the threat sink in, "we will cut off your supply routes, seize your colonies, and let your empire collapse." The silence that followed was heavy with fear. The council knew Jake wasn't bluffing. The humans had prepared for this moment carefully. They had turned the tables now. The aliens were the ones trapped in a corner. The council's decision. The chamber erupted into arguments as delegates whispered furiously among themselves. Some demanded that the guilty factions be handed over immediately to avoid further conflict. Others warned that giving in to humanity's demands would weaken the council's authority. Valar looked around, realizing that his allies were abandoning him. They were too scared to stand against Earth. He knew he had no choice but to surrender. "Fine," Valar growled bitterly. "We will cooperate." Jake gave a small nod. "Good choice. A new era begins with the guilty factions exposed and the reparations agreed upon." The council voted to recognize humanity as an equal member. No longer would Earth be treated as a minor species. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and everyone in the room knew it. Jake left the chamber. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The council had thought they could control humanity. They had thought Earth was weak. But humans had outplayed them at their own game. The tables had turned, and the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. On that day, the Galactic Council learned a hard lesson. Humans may look weak on the surface, but they are survivors, strategists, and fighters. When pushed into a corner, they don't crumble, they fight back, smarter and harder than anyone expects. And now, with Earth standing tall among the stars, the galaxy knew one thing for sure: no one would ever dare attack humanity again. The Galactic Council Chamber, where hundreds of alien leaders gathered, had always been a place for diplomacy and control. The most powerful races made decisions that shaped the future of the galaxy, while smaller, newer species followed their orders. Humanity, just admitted into the council, was treated like an afterthought, a species that could be ignored, managed, and pushed around. Ambassador Elena Cruz knew this well. Every time she spoke, her words were dismissed with polite smiles or ignored altogether. The council had little respect for humans, seeing them as too young and insignificant to make any real difference. But today would change everything. Elena stood up slowly, adjusting her gray uniform. Her expression was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. She knew what she was about to say would shake the council to its core. The alien delegates continued their discussions, not paying her much attention. Some whispered to each other, others studied maps and trade data floating in holograms. Elena took a step forward and cleared her throat. "We need to talk about the attack on our colonies," she said. The room grew a little quieter, though most of the aliens still ignored her. The leader of the Ivara Consortium, a bird-like alien with glowing blue feathers, gave an impatient squawk. "What attack? We know nothing of this." Elena's voice hardened. "Our colonies on Mars and Europa were destroyed 3 years ago." The murmuring in the room stopped entirely. "Destroyed?" One of the reptilian ambassadors hissed. "By whom? Surely not by us." Elena stared coldly at the room. "We know exactly who was behind it." A dark truth uncovered, she pressed a button on her console, and the room's lights dimmed. In the center of the chamber, a hologram appeared, showing footage of burned-out human habitats, shattered domes on Mars, and ruins on Europa's frozen surface. Wrecked transport ships floated lifelessly in space. The aliens watched in silence, but the tension was growing. Some of the delegates exchanged uneasy glances, shifting in their seats. They had not expected this. "At first, we thought these were attacks by space pirates," Elena continued, her voice calm but sharp. "But we dug deeper. The pirates were working with resources and weapons far beyond their usual means." She tapped the console again, and a second hologram flickered into view, blueprints of alien weapons and communication logs between pirate groups and certain factions in the council. The records proved beyond doubt that some of the council members had secretly funded the pirates. "You thought no one would survive to tell the truth," Elena said, her voice carrying across the room like a blade. "You wanted to cripple us before we became strong enough to compete with you." The guilty factions seated quietly in the corner shifted nervously. Their names had not been spoken aloud yet, but they knew they were exposed. The silent revenge of the more powerful aliens, an 8-limbed being with glowing red eyes, spoke up. "Ambassador Cruz, if you think bringing this to the council will gain you sympathy, you are mistaken. What's done is done." Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You don't understand, do you? We're not here to ask for sympathy." The lights in the room dimmed even further as the hologram changed. Now, the display showed dozens of alien outposts and space stations silent, abandoned, and lifeless. The alien leaders gasped in shock. "What is this?" a panicked voice demanded. Elena folded her arms. "These are your outposts. The ones we destroyed." The room erupted in chaos. Alien representatives shouted over each other in disbelief, their faces twisted with fear and confusion. "Impossible." "When? How?" Elena stood firm in the storm of voices. "Over the past 2 years, while you thought we were still weak, we quietly took out your key bases. We made it look like accidents, like pirate raids. Your fleets never saw us coming." She gave them a cold smile. "This is our revenge." The power of patience, the alien leaders were stunned. They had believed humans were too weak to retaliate, but now they realized just how wrong they had been. Earth had not rushed into war. It had struck back quietly, strategically. Elena let the silence stretch for a few moments, letting the weight of her words sink in. The message was clear. Humanity was not a helpless victim. They had taken their time, waited for the right moment, and turned the tables without anyone noticing. One of the ambassadors, a gray-skinned alien with narrow black eyes, finally spoke. "Why didn't you announce this earlier? Why wait?" Elena's gaze was unwavering. "Because revenge is most effective when it's unexpected." The alien leaders, once so confident in their power, now looked at her with fear. They had underestimated humans, and they were paying the price. The ultimatum. Elena stepped closer to the center of the room. "We have no interest in a full-scale war," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. "We don't need to destroy everything. But we can. And we will if you force our hand." She let that sink in before continuing. "You have a choice. Either hand over the factions responsible for the attack on our colonies, or we will continue our silent campaign until your entire empire falls apart." The alien leaders exchanged panicked glances. They knew they had no choice. The humans had already proven they were capable of wiping out critical outposts without warning. If they didn't act now, their entire network of power could collapse. The council's surrender after a long, tense silence. One of the senior council members, a towering reptilian alien with scarred scales, spoke up. We will cooperate. The factions responsible will be punished." Elena nodded once, satisfied. "Good. And the reparations for the destruction of our colonies?" The reptilian leader gave a reluctant growl. "We will arrange for the reparations." Elena smiled. "Excellent." In one day, humanity had shattered the illusion of control the Council thought it had over them. The humans, once ignored and underestimated, had proven themselves to be more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. They had thought humanity was weak. But humanity had waited, planned, and struck back when the time was right without ever firing a shot in open battle. The Galactic Council learned a harsh lesson that day. Humans do not forget, and they do not forgive easily. When they are attacked, they respond, but not in the way their enemies expect. And now, with Earth standing quietly but powerfully among the stars, the galaxy knew one thing for sure: no one would ever underestimate humanity again. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with alien representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Some were reptilian with shimmering scales, others insect-like with twitching antennae. All were gathered to discuss trade agreements, territorial disputes, and planetary alliances. As usual, the humans were treated as little more than spectators observers who had only recently earned a seat at the table. The council was in the middle of a heated debate about expanding resource extraction rights when Ambassador David Carson rose from his seat. His uniform was neat and his expression was neutral, but his dark eyes burned with controlled anger. He cleared his throat, silencing the murmurs in the room. "Before we continue with these discussions," David said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge, "I have a message from Earth. A final warning." The room grew quieter. Some of the older alien races shifted in their seats, exchanging curious glances. A large snake-like alien hissed in amusement. "A warning?" It sneered. "From Earth?" Laughter echoed around the chamber. To the other members of the council, the idea of humanity, a young and relatively weak species, issuing a warning to the entire galaxy was ridiculous. David remained calm, waiting for the laughter to fade. "Yes," he said quietly. "A warning. And it will be the last one." The attack that changed everything pressed a button on the console before him. The lights dimmed, and a hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It showed footage of human colonies burned, bombarded, and destroyed. Children evacuated from shattered cities, supply ships ambushed in deep space, and families fleeing for their lives. The laughter in the room died immediately. Even the most arrogant aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. David spoke again, his voice low and controlled. "You thought we wouldn't notice. You thought we wouldn't respond. But we know who funded the pirate attacks. We know which factions provided weapons to the mercenaries." He gestured toward the hologram, and it shifted to reveal intercepted communications, trade routes altered to enable the attacks, and weapon designs stolen from council vaults. The evidence was undeniable. The guilty factions, represented by nervous-looking aliens seated along the edges of the room, sat in silence. The calm before the stormone of the older council members, Ambassador Exil of the Varuk Empire, raised a clawed hand to speak. "This is unfortunate," Exil said slowly. "But surely this was a misunderstanding. You humans are new to these kinds of politics. Accidents happen in space." David's expression didn't change. This was no accident. It was deliberate. Syl shifted in his seat, annoyed by the human's calm tone. "And what do you plan to do about it?" he asked with a sneer. "Human fleets are still small. Your colonies are scattered. Surely you don't expect to threaten us." David allowed himself a small, cold smile. "We don't need to threaten you. We already took action." The lights dimmed further, and the hologram changed again. Now it showed a series of alien supply stations, fuel depots, and research facilities destroyed. Silent wreckage drifted in space, entire stations reduced to ruins. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted over one another, trying to understand what had happened. The humans had been quiet for years, seemingly recovering from the attacks, but instead they had quietly struck back. The hidden war David let the noise die down before speaking again. While you were busy underestimating us, we dismantled your operations one by one. You didn't notice because we didn't declare war. We didn't send warnings. We just acted. He looked around the room, his gaze cold and steady. And now, we are here to deliver a message. A final warning. A slender alien with iridescent skin, clearly nervous, leaned forward. What? What do you want? It asked cautiously. David folded his arms. We want those responsible for the attacks on our colonies. Hand them over, or we will continue dismantling your operations. We will strike where you least expect it. We will bring your empires to their knees without ever declaring war. The silence in the room was deafening. The council members had thought the humans were weak, too inexperienced to retaliate. Now they realized they had made a grave mistake. The ultimatum David's expression remained neutral, but his words carried the weight of iron. This is your last chance. If you don't hand over the ones responsible, there won't be a second warning. There will only be consequences. The council members exchanged panicked glances. They knew David wasn't bluffing. Humans had already proven they could strike in silence, dismantling key infrastructure without being detected. If they refused his demands, there was no telling what Earth might do next. One of the guilty ambassadors, a hulking creature with gray scales and sharp tusks, hissed angrily. You can't dictate terms to us. The galaxy doesn't answer to humans. David met his gaze without flinching. You're right. But the galaxy can't stop us either. And you know it. The council's decision after a long moment of silence. One of the senior members of the council, a wrinkled alien with glowing green eyes, rose to speak. We will comply, it said reluctantly. Those responsible will be handed over to Earth. Reparations will be arranged. David gave a small nod. Good. The guilty factions looked furious, but they knew they had no choice. The humans had turned the tables, and now, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. The end of underestimations. David left the chamber. The alien leaders sat in stunned silence. In one meeting, the humans had shattered the illusion of control the council thought it had over them. They had learned the hard way that Earth was not a species to be toyed with. They had assumed humans were weak, naive, and easy to manipulate. But the quiet retaliation had shown them otherwise. Humanity was not just a participant in the galaxy, they were a force to be reckoned with. The message was clear: Earth would not be pushed around. If anyone dared attack humanity again, the consequences would come swiftly, silently, and without mercy. The galaxy had been warned, and this time, it was listening.